Hi, everyone. I'm Diane Wilson. I'm hostess of the Genius podcast, Sciencing Our Human Potential. And today, getting back to our podcast here, you'll see what we've been working on and meet one key person that's been involved. My special guest today is Kevin Theis. He's a Chicago actor, director, production manager, and his notable achievement relevant here is that he has narrated over 300 audiobooks. And so welcome, Kevin. So happy to have you today.
Thank you, Diane.
So I wanted to talk with you about what makes an audiobook. What do you think of audiobooks? And just the takeaway for our audience would be that they would know more about what goes into an audiobook and why it's valuable to them. And just a little bit more background before we let Kevin talk here is when I went to do the audiobook for Brain Dance, I talked to a number of people in the Chicago area. I'm a big researcher, and everybody said the same thing. They said, you need to talk to Kevin Theis. This is what he does. He's the expert. And so we made some decisions. We connected, and he's the production manager of our recent release of Brain Dance's audiobook. So welcome, Kevin.
Thank you, Diane. Well, I was going to say, it's a funny thing. People think of audiobooks as sort of a new phenomenon, but they're really not. Audiobooks are as old as audio recordings. What's really interesting, if you do, I did a little bit of history on this when I first started getting into audiobooks. And what you discover is from the very first time that they came up with the ability to record people, back in Edison's day, they would start to record books and poems and sonnets and all these things, and they would try to release them for people who couldn't read or for who were both blind and those who just had difficulty reading. The problem, of course, was back in the day, the recording spools that they would put them on were so short that you couldn't put an entire book on them. So it wasn't until they started to do LPs and really large, long recordings that they started to actually record books back in the 40s and 50s. And then it never really caught on, though. It was never really a big phenomenon until the digital age, because now you can walk around with hours and hours of audio on your phone or on your device. And so audiobooks in the last 20 or so years have just exploded. And now if you write a book, it's expected that you're going to probably also release an audiobook, because it theoretically can double the income stream on your piece of fiction or on your piece of nonfiction. And so I've been doing this for about 6 years now. I've been recording books and helping others bring their books to life. And it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. What makes a good audiobook for listeners?
I really believe the best audiobooks are where the person who's narrating the book is speaking as if they're speaking to a real human being. The problem with audiobooks very much is people get performative with it, and they sort of act like they're talking to children or they're talking to sort of some nameless, faceless listener. And it doesn't really work if you do that. When you read an audiobook, you have to tell the story as if you're telling it to a specific person. You have to have your audience in mind, because then you bring yourself to it. You speak to your listener as if they're a person that you know, and it's gonna come through in your voice. The best audiobooks, it feels as if the narrator is speaking specifically to you. Those are the best.
Mm-hmm. I remember our decision in terms of recording Brain Dance. It's like, should I hire someone? I had someone very specific in mind, like Kellyanne Clark. She's an actress. She's in my community, and she's just wonderful. And then you and I talked about it, and you had some specific input. In terms of audiobooks, what does it mean for authors to read their own book? What's the impact of that?
Generally, authors don't like to read their own work. They are writers and they are not narrators, and they know that. And so they don't attempt to do it. They're happy to hire a professional to read it, and they'll pay them whatever they need to pay them so that they don't have to read their book. But honestly, I believe that if a writer has the ability and the desire to read their book, then they should. The tech is not that difficult to surmount as far as the difficulties go. If you wrote a book and you want to be the voice of that book and you want to read that book for audiobook purposes and get it out there with your voice, you should do it. You should spend whatever money is necessary to get your voice on that project. But a lot of people, a lot of people choose not to do that. And that's a perfectly valid choice. If you don't want to read it, don't read it, because you're going to get no enjoyment out of it if you read something against your will. I guarantee you. You have to have a desire to read your own book. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. So I remember sending you samples going, Kevin, is this going to work? I will do the best thing for Brain Dance. It's my baby.
Right. No, but specifically with your book, I think it was really important that you read it because you brought so much emotion and feeling and compassion and memory, and it was very moving to listen to it. And I remember we discussed several times whether or not we should leave the emotional parts in the audiobook or, sort of do them a little more detached and a little more just straight reading. And I remember saying, no, I really love how much emotion you use when you're reading it. You really felt it in the moment. And I'm glad we kept that stuff.
I remember putting aside chapter 10 over and over going, do we do this? Do we not? Because I think as an author, a narrator, the last thing you want to do is wear out your audience and, cause them stress. But I think, I'm not sure it did that. I think it did something else.
It brings a certain level of authenticity and truth to the story. And I was really happy that you decided to leave it in because it's not false. It's not fake. It's not something someone is pretending to feel. It's real. It's in the moment, and it's authentic, and it's you.
Yeah. It's and for authors considering if your book is a memoir and if you've come up against struggle, be prepared because the narration process it's I don't know. In some ways it was more fun than writing it, but in telling it, I had someone very specific in mind I wanted to tell this story to. It's a relative. And doing it was a pretty emotional experience. It lasted for 2 or 3 weeks, diving into the recording booth is like diving into the story and reliving it. But it's like Phoenix, you come out on the other side, you feel much, much better. And my hope is that it gives people that same feeling that you can come through adversity. You can come through adversity and be better for it.
Yeah. And that's the story. And the fact that you were able to give it your own voice, I think, made it that much better.
Mm-hmm. Tell me your favorite narration so far or your favorite project. I realize this is kind of like, do you like my baby sort of question.
No. It's funny because I sort of got into audiobooks by accident. I had written a book and I wanted to do the audiobook version of it. And so I did. This was before I knew anything about what I was doing. I had a little sort of a fake booth set up in my house because I do voiceover auditions as an actor. So I had a microphone and a computer, but I had no knowledge of how to properly record and produce an audiobook. So I just faked it. I set up a little booth, got in my basement, and I took a week off of work and I spent hours a day reading this book into the microphone. It took me a full week to read it. It took me another 3 weeks to edit it. And even after that, once I loaded it up to Audible to be released, I didn't know if it would pass their quality control check. I thought they would bounce it back to me and say, this is amateurish and terrible. And it's awful. And it didn't. It passed muster and the book was released. And I was absolutely thrilled. And I thought that was it. I thought that would be the only audiobook I'd ever do in my whole life. And then I was in California, and I'm hanging out with a friend of mine who is an audiobook narrator in Los Angeles. And he invited me to a SAG-AFTRA meeting, a union meeting in Los Angeles to talk about audiobooks. And I had nothing better to do, so I went with him. And I went to this union meeting. And if you've ever been to a union meeting, there's usually about 8 people there. 6 people are up, who are the union reps on the stage, and 2 people are in the audience who don't have a life. And instead, I get to this meeting, and there's 150 people there. There's union reps, and there's about 120 something narrators there. And they're all talking about the money that they're making and the fact that they make up their own hours and the booths they have set up in their houses, and how much cash they were raking in. And I was like, what is going on here? I got to get involved in this. And I later talked about it. I felt like I was standing on a pier looking at a party barge go by, and they're all drinking and dancing to this music, and they're having a great time. And I was like, is there room for one more on that boat? I'd really like to go on that journey with you. And so I had a little microphone with me, and I went back to the house I was staying in Los Angeles, and I auditioned for like 3 or 4 audiobooks to see what it was like. And I got hired like the second day. I got this notification that they wanted me to narrate 2 audiobooks, and it scared the life out of me. I had no idea what I was doing. And my friend Chuck, who had taken me to this union meeting, he set me up in his booth. He had a booth in his house. He called it John Wilkes, by the way.
John Wilkes booth. Got it.
And so he allowed me to use his booth to record these 2 audiobooks in a single day. We did them both in one day. And right then I said 2 things. I said, number 1, I want to do this. I want to continue doing this. And number 2, I'm not going to do it anymore until I'm back in Chicago, and I can set up my own booth, and I can start, doing this full time. And I came back from Los Angeles to Chicago, and that became my new full-time career. And I've been doing that full time now for 6 years. I've narrated, as you said, I've done now over 300 books, but I've also produced a few dozen books, both for myself and for authors like you. I work with people who want to bring their audiobooks to life. We get them in a booth, we get them down on tape. I help them record the piece, I help them edit it, and then we release it, and they're published narrators. And it's really been a lot of fun.
Wow. Yeah, this was interesting, very, very interesting to do. And you were a good companion. I think it's, the things you helped to become more real. And I don't feel like you changed my delivery or anything, just made it easier to listen to. And also you're a certified night person like I am. And, and so we exchanged emails at 11:30 and 12 o'clock at night, which was just perfect flow for me.
Yep. Works for me too. Yeah. Well, being an audiobook narrator will turn you into a night person, because it's the best time to record, because there's no leaf blowers and lawn mowers and people working on, their roof across the alley, and, kids running around outside. It's really nice and quiet, and everybody's, cool, and you rarely hear anything outside. And so actually, after 10 o'clock at night is the perfect time to narrate a book.
Yes. Okay, so have you noticed patterns of how people can best use audiobooks? It seems like in talking with people, that people are or are not audiobook listeners. And with Braindance, because the delivery is better than reading for some people, especially if they have focus issues. What have you learned about how people can digest audiobooks, the patterns that people have that make it easier for them to benefit from them?
Some people don't like audiobooks at all. My wife won't listen to them. She doesn't like, she likes to read. She likes to have an actual book in front of her, and she likes to read the story and have her own voice sort of narrated in her head. And that's perfectly fine. But some people love to listen to them on their commute. They'll be driving into the city or on a train, or if they have a job that allows them to sort of plug in, if they're doing something with their hands, and they can, listen to an audiobook at the same time that they're working. People who work outdoors, or when you go to the gym, or when you're out for a run. people plug in and listen to audiobooks all the time. And I don't think there's any hard and fast rule about how to do them properly or the right way to do an audiobook, because, tastes really differ. But if you're not, my opinion is, if you're not talking to the listener as if they're a friend of yours, you're going to miss out on the ability to touch them or to reach them or to make the story come alive to them. If it's just you bombastically talking and reading and not really connecting to the words or the listener, then it's not going to be worth listening to.
That was easier to do with this book, I would imagine, than say my first book, but because that was the intent of the book, was to tell a story, to bring people on my journey. So it was, just really a incredible experience to do it. I don't know that I'll listen to it. I certainly listened to the samples on the way, but I think it'll be a treat for people to listen to, or at least that's my hope. What was your biggest takeaway from, being involved in this content, the process of recording this particular book?
Well, when I've had the great pleasure of working with a number of authors who have brought their own work to life, where they read their own stories or they read their own nonfiction. But I think what made yours unique is most of the stuff that I've recorded for other people, the authors are not that intimately intertwined with their story. I read, for example, I did a book for an author on leadership skills. And what she was narrating was really important to her. And she brought a great intelligence and compassion, and the story was really interesting to listen to. And then there was another lady who did one on Gen Z and talked about the next generation of people that come up. And she had all these fascinating facts and figures and statistics and stories and all kinds of, it was absolutely mesmerizing, this story. But neither one of those had the same kind of emotional connection to their story that yours did. Your journey is such an extraordinary one, and the suffering and the inspiration that you got and that you give to others through the story made it a really unique experience to work on this audiobook, because I don't think I've ever worked on a piece that where the author was so emotionally connected to the work. And so that made it a really special experience.
Sure. I think I'm going to cry. Sorry. That's really beautiful. I know there was one point where you go, I'm not objective anymore. I love this. This is inspiring. And that was really, it made it easier. It was like someone, you're trudging through a miserable, difficult trudge, and someone gives you like a bottle of water. It's like, there's a reason I'm doing this. So, well, good. Thank you. I just am excited about the platform of sharing people's stories. I'm excited about our work together and creating this. I'm really hopeful that it reaches people that need to hear the story and about applied neuroscience and the tools of helping our brain and creating peak performance, that there's really hope. I think for many people that have injuries, that they don't see a sense of hope, or they don't know real people that have gone through this and come out the other side. And I mean, that's the purpose of the book, is to give people that vision and that hope. So thank you for helping me make that come alive, and for being with me today.
Of course. Just as a little commercial plug, anybody who's interested in turning their book into an audiobook, they can always reach out to me. My company is Fort Raphael Publishing Company. That's Raphael, Raphael. But if you go to fortraphael.com, we make it as affordable as we possibly can. You can narrate books yourself. You can hire others, professionals, to narrate your book. It's a really interesting way to take something you've created and create something new with it.
Absolutely. And another plug is the course. I took your course on how to narrate a book, not because I wanted to be a book narrator, although I know that that's your goal for me. But that was helpful. And you offer that regularly, right?
Yes, I teach a monthly class, how to become an audiobook narrator. That's correct.
It was helpful for me to see the background to that, and also excellent. And then also, while we're sharing our messages, the audiobook is now available.
Yes. Yeah, Braindance is out. It's available right now.
It's New Zealand, Mexico, everywhere. 50
everywhere.
Retail locations, the streaming services. It's available in the library on Hoopla.
Yeah, it's everywhere.
It's great. So thanks everyone for being with us today. This is what I've been doing. This is my special project, and very special. This is Kevin, who has made it special. Another person who made it special is Abby Lyons, who composed the music. We have, she composed a piece called Ballet Mind, which you hear in just small segments, but we'll be using in some of our other work. So thank you very much, Abby. Huge thanks to you, Kevin. And thanks to our audience for listening and for caring. Thank you.